Hi everyone, this is Sonora Slater and you're listening to Agricola with the California Aggie, UC Davis's student-run newspaper. Maybe you've read our articles online or picked up a paper from the newsstand inside Shields Library, but we're coming to you now in an audio format. I'm really excited to dive into providing you a deeper look at the people, places, and events we cover every day at the Aggie, and I hope you enjoy listening. Today, we'll be diving into the pro-Palestine encampment at UC Davis, what their demands are, what it's like inside the encampment, and what the administration's response has been so far. On the morning of Monday, May 6th, Davis Popular University for the Liberation of Palestine, or PULP, organizers set up tents and canopies in the center of the Memorial Union Quad to protest for Palestine. The group, which now joins several other college campuses, has a list of 5 demands that they are asking the university to address. The demands include the University of California system divesting from Israel, a total academic cultural boycott, investing in Palestine and Arab American studies, respect for free speech and no repression, and Chancellor Gary May either resigning from his position on the executive board of Leidos or as chancellor of the university. A statement from Chancellor Gary May on the encampment was released on May 6th, and it says the following. UC Davis is committed to a safe and peaceful campus environment that respects our community's right to free expression while maintaining our educational and research mission without disruption. As of Monday, May 6th at 9:15 a.m., a group named UC Davis Popular University for the Liberation of Palestine, or UCD PULP, began erecting at least 20 tents on the quad, consistent with actions taken on campuses across the country. We are actively engaging the students to mitigate any disruption of campus operations, including access to classrooms, work areas, study spaces, or residence halls. We are in contact with participants about their rights and responsibilities under the law and university policies, including the overnight camping policy. As a public university, UC Davis cannot and will not discipline students for speech protected by the First Amendment. We allow peaceful protests and are committed to keeping everyone safe. Our student affairs team is working closely with UCD PULP members to offer guidance or information today, and they will remain available to UCD PULP to discuss their needs. We are reviewing the demands we've seen posted and are working on responding. The main call of UC Davis PULP and other encampments around the country is divestment. But what exactly is divestment? Essentially, it's undoing an investment. These university investments are made with universities' endowment funds, which grow over time and supplement university operations. These investments might be in private equity funds, hedge funds, or public companies. UC Davis's endowment crossed the $2 billion mark in 2021. The goal of many pro-Palestinian protesters on college campuses currently is to pressure their universities into divesting endowment funds from any companies with Israeli ties, or that are profiting from the Israel-Palestine conflict. Rivers Stout, a reporter on our campus news desk, has been leading our coverage of the protests. Here's Rivers now to tell us more about what it's like inside the encampment. Rivers, you've been leading our news coverage for the campus news desk. You've been inside the encampment. Do you want to give us a little bit of context for when these encampments were set up, when you're walking into the UC Davis quad? What does it look like? How many tents are there? How big is it? Anything like that?
Yeah, so the encampment came up on Monday, around 9 a.m. I want to say, and it was rather small back then. It had maybe about 20, 25 tents. And initially there was kind of a low black tarp, maybe around like hip height, I want to say, that went all around the encampment and you could pretty easily see into it. But since then, it has expanded a lot, I would say. The other day I went into the encampment and I was able to see about how many tents were there. And I would say at the very least, there was like 65. Probably more accurate is that there are 70 plus tents in there, and that's just tents for sleeping in. They have other tents as well for amenities or for storage, any other reason. And they actually took down the initial black tarp barrier that they had one night when I was there, and I actually saw them take it out, and then they started hammering in posts, something like that, and they took a new kind of tough cloth, I would call it, around. So now you can kind of see the encampment, but you can't see people's faces. And there's kind of just like this beige wall with tents inside of it. That's how I would describe how it looks.
There are also signs on the walls, a lot of postings and stuff like that, right? There's a check-in area. What is sort of the entrance looking like, and what sort of things do they have posted for people to see on the outside?
Yeah, so the entrance, they actually hadn't moved forward, and I've been told that there's plans for expanding it just because of how many people have been going into it. But, it's just one of those kind of standard canopies, 4 leg canopies that you see with like little triangles on top or pyramids on top. And they always have somebody manning it, really. And it's always having a long line. And in regards to signs, there's been a lot of signage around it. Things that I remember specifically are things like hands off Rafah, Jews for a ceasefire, free Palestine. There's just tons of different signage, stuff that I've seen before, so like printed signs, as well as things that have definitely been painted there, or at least produced more recently.
What's it like inside the encampment? What was your experience?
Yeah, so I took a tour of the encampment yesterday, which was Wednesday the 8th, I believe, right? Immediately when I go in there, it, it feels like, I don't know, when you're outside, it's kind of almost hostile because there's so many people out there who are yelling or taking photographs, and the security, and it's a really awkward environment outside. But when I went inside, I think it was almost relaxed, not quite, because my tour guide was part of the organizing team or something along those lines of whatever they have. So they were always busy, and I got like little glimpses of what it's like when you're organizing in there. But I also saw what people inside were doing, like just the campers, campers, whatever that word is. And I mean, camp, it's a suitable word because they were doing camp-like activities. There was arts and crafts. There was chalk everywhere. The tents were painted up, or some tents were, and it really seemed to be like a communal affair going on, and they're very different from the feeling outside.
Yeah. So I know that every day they've been posting this sort of daily schedule on their Instagram. UC Davis Pulp, who's the group or sort of name for the place of the encampment that's happening. What sort of programming, what sort of things happen daily inside of the encampment?
Well, daily inside the encampment, which UCD Pulp is only the location. It's not an organization or any sort of student group. It is just the location's name, UC Davis, Popular University for the Liberation of Palestine. Well, they serve food in there for one. Like I believe there's breakfast. I don't know about lunch, but I was definitely there during dinner time as well, or at least the start of it. There's also a lot of well, of course, it's programming. The programming consists of things like teach-ins. I know earlier today they had a community reading on a piece by a famous Palestinian, I don't know, professor or thinker, and I think that's a lot of it right there. Oh, I'm sorry. There's also, like I said, lots of arts and crafts where people just do artsy things.
All right. So you mentioned that there is food being served. So where is that food coming from? I know they've also asked for donations of like books and things like that. What is the sense of organization in terms of resources within the camp?
Well, specifically for food, the first couple of days, and I was watching, like, the first day I was there a long time, and there was just lines of people. A lot of them had donations, a lot of them wanted to go inside, but there was so much food donated there. I don't know how much was brought in by the organizers or people who were camping there, but there's definitely a significant amount of community members, whether it be of Davis, Sacramento, or UC Davis specifically, who are donating food, and this is food of all sorts, right? They got perishables for a while, though I believe they've requested for no more perishables. They had whole cooked meals delivered to them. I was there one night and they had pizza delivered too, but then they also have a lot of canned food. They have a lot of water as well.
What is the response to you being there as a person of the media been? You mentioned that the barriers were high enough that you couldn't see protesters' faces. So what has the culture been around the coverage? Because there's been a lot of news media there to cover the protests.
Yeah, so from what I've been told, kind of when news media goes there and they ask, hey, or they even give a heads up like, hey, we're going to be recording some things. What I've been told and what I have observed is that normally people in the camp are like pretty compliant with it. They're like, hey, thanks for telling us, something along those lines. And they get good footage. Of course, there's also an announcement across the camp being like, this area is going to have people filming. If you don't want to be filmed, don't be there, or put on some sort of mask and sunglasses. And when I personally was able to go inside, people basically ignored me. The person who was touring me around they are a media liaison, but they're more than that as well. So they were constantly busy. And even the people they're coordinating with more or less ignored me. Like, people knew I was press. I had my press badge. It was announced, but I was paid no attention for the most part. At the time, I was one of the only media people to go in, as they had asked others to not, though I believe this policy has changed recently, or at least they've allowed other media into the camp.
And what has sort of the community response been around this? What is the culture like outside of the area? Is there a lot going on there? People just sort of walking past the quad as usual to get to their classes? What's that like?
I think there's kind of like three main approaches to it. There's people who are very supportive, there's people who don't really care, and then there's people who are very much against it. The people who are supportive, right, especially in the first couple of days, there was just massive lines waiting to get in. There's a bunch of people who had materials to bring, like food, tents, anything to kind of just help facilitate living in the camp. And then, of course, a lot of people don't pay much attention. They don't think it involves them, or they just don't really care. And of course, they go about their day. And then there's people who are very much against the encampment, whether they're offended by it or they just dislike that it is happening. And personally, every time that I have been there to do any sort of coverage or get an interview, I have always seen people taking photos, probably without permission. There's typically, I won't say every time, but I think nearly every time that I've been there, there is something that I would call harassment happening nearby, where there's somebody who's just incessantly taking photos like in their faces, or there's somebody yelling at them. Like, I remember yesterday on my way out, there was a man standing outside who said to one of the guards, "You look like you should be holding a machine gun right now." I've also seen local Moms for Liberty leader Beth Bourne there. She was there on the first day, and she was yelling a lot about transgender and non-binary people. I was passing by, so I'm not sure entirely what happened, but apparently she kept them busy for a while. And then on the second night, I want to say, there was kind of like a paper banner put up outside the camp that said "Jewish Lives Matter too," and a bunch of other things, and that was put up by people who were generally displeased in some way or another with the encampment.
Just to clarify, that wasn't in relation to Beth Bourne. Those are two separate incidents. Yes.
Those are, to my knowledge, two separate things, yes. From what we've been told, that sign was put up by a group called the Davis October 7th Coalition.
So I know at other campuses, counter-protesters have played a big part in how these encampments have played out. And this seems like maybe a small version of that, or the beginning of that. In terms of security, what is there? Is there anything? Do you know if there's any plans for more security, or how concerned are the protesters about counter-protesters coming in?
So yeah, to what you're saying about it being little or the beginnings, I would definitely think it's the beginning of a thing, of more counter-protest action. And they have security guards stationed outside at all times. They kind of just stand around. A lot of them have umbrellas in case people try to take photos, so they put those up to stop photographers or anything like that. And they always have people like scattered around. It's not just one person, right? There's always a few around the perimeter of the camp. Inside the camp, I think people are definitely wary about counter-protesters, but like I said, it's very relaxed in there. When there's word of something, a lot of people kind of like turn around from where the photos might be, and I don't know this for a fact, but I definitely believe that most of the campers in there aren't really like part of resisting counter-protesters. I think that's kind of just a few people who have to deal with that, and everybody else inside goes about doing their thing. Here's one of Pulp's media liaisons who has remained unidentified. Can you please describe the incident that happened last night?
So last night, after midnight, 3 people from off campus came up to the camp, and they yelled "Rise and Shine" and racial epithets at the camp. The student security members responded and were able to run them off. One of the agitators who had come by tried to push security, and security did not engage at all. Security protected us, and we defended ourselves. And later, those people were apprehended because a safe ride driver had called the cops. But at the end of the day, we protected ourselves, and we were able to keep the camp safe.
Okay, and to clarify, these racial epithets are targeted towards people of Arabic descent?
I'm not sure what the racial epithets were, but they were targeted at members of the camp.
And this camp is a diverse camp of people from all walks of life, yes?
Yes, people in the camp are all races, religions, and nationalities, or not all, but everyone is welcome.
And is this the first time this has happened?
It's the first time people approached at night. We've had people come up during the day and kind of yell at security or yell at members of the camp, but it's the first time in the middle of the night people came up with flashlights approaching suddenly.
And is the use of racial epithets common from people who come to agitate?
I haven't heard the specifics. I know words like terrorist are used a lot, which I believe is a racial epithet, and that those have been used by others as well, but I'm not exactly sure what epithets were said last night, so I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. And here's Stanford McConaughey, a King Hall Law student and one of Pope's media liaisons.
So we're here today to uplift our 5 demands, which center disclosure and divestment of UC Davis Foundation and the UC-wide investment pools and all investment funds. We're here to demand a complete cultural and academic boycott of the Zionist State of Israel, including the cancellation of the UC Davis Veterinary School's exchange program with the Koret School of Veterinary Medicine with the Hebrew University.
Okay, and
so we're uplifting the same demands that we've been uplifting for months on this campus while the genocide is unfolding in occupied Palestine.
On Tuesday, May 7th, Aggies for Israel at UC Davis published an open letter on Instagram to the UC Davis community regarding the establishment of the UC Davis Pulp Encampment. It reads as follows. Dear UC Davis, yesterday morning, a popular University for the Liberation of Palestine encampment movement appeared in the middle of our quad. This movement, launched by National Students for Justice in Palestine, is an attempt to get the university to disclose and divest from all connections to Israel. While at the moment the protest appears for the most part peaceful, on campuses around the country, many of these protests have become hotbeds for anti-Semitism and violence against Jewish, Israeli, and Zionist students. They have prevented Jewish and pro-Israel students from entering classes, libraries, and main campus areas. They have led to the cancellation of commencement ceremonies. While, on a fundamental level, free speech and student protest often do have influence on political decisions, in this particular case there is a very fine line between what these protests intend on achieving and the detrimental effects to campus Jewish communities they are creating. To our community, or any students feeling connected to Aggies for Israel, we are here for you. We see you, we hear you, and we will continue for the duration of the encampment to be present on campus. You, as a Jewish, Israeli, or pro-Israel student, deserve to feel supported and safe on campus. Whether it be picnics, tabling, etc., Aggies for Israel will continue to show up and provide a safe space for you all on campus. Additionally, we are working with administrators, specifically Student Affairs and the Center for Student Involvement, to ensure that you all have access to safe, relatively uninterrupted education and activities on campus. Your freedom of expression and right to an education are valued here. If you have any questions about the steps we are taking to attempt to create a safe space for Jewish students, please DM us. At the end of this letter, we have posted updated resources for your emotional and physical safety during this time of increased polarization and tensions on campus. While Jewish student safety and presence on campus are our highest priorities as an organization, we also would like to acknowledge that on other campuses, there have been instances of violence, hate, and fear-mongering that come from pro-Israel individuals. We ask that students at UC Davis who are in opposition to the encampment and its demands think before they act, and do not physically or verbally harass members of the encampment. We denounce any actions that break this request. This is a public university with a diverse student body. Freedom of speech is an important part of expression on college campuses, and as long as the encampment remains peaceful, we respect the rights of our peers to have freedom of speech. One of the demands of UC Davis Pulp is that Chancellor Gary May either resign from his position on the board of Leidos or as Chancellor of the university. The California Aggies editorial board meets with May and administrators each quarter to ask questions about recent campus events, and during our fall quarter meeting on November 21st, 2023, we asked him about his involvement with Leidos. Here's the response he gave during that meeting.
You sit on the board of Leidos, a company that, among other things, works with the Israeli Ministry of Defense. What initially went into the decision to be a part of this board, and has the recent violence in the region or student gatherings related to the Israel-Palestine conflict affected how you feel about supporting Leidos?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for the question. This generated a lot of energy around campus, a lot of misinformation, what I would call illogical, inaccurate reactions, insulting reactions. And in most of those type of reactions, in almost all cases, no one has talked to me directly, so I appreciate you asking me directly the question. I've always been transparent about my service on this board. In fact, it is a requirement in the UC that all outside professional activities be reported annually and disclosed, so those reports are available. I'll just start at the beginning, and I apologize if the answer gets long, but I just want you to kind of get the context. So I was invited to join that board in 2015 before I became chancellor here. I was dean of engineering at Georgia Tech at the time I was invited. And I was invited by a person at the time who was a fellow board member. And at that time, also, the CEO of the company was a friend and an fellow alum of Georgia Tech. And he was also a generous donor to the university. So I decided to join. I think I was invited because there was a retiring board member who was an academic, and they wanted to replace that expertise. They also were seeking to add diversity to the board, and they wanted someone who could help them add to their STEM diversity in their workforce, which are things that I've been sort of championing for a long time. Service on the board of a public company is widely viewed to be a huge honor, which is something I don't think is recognized. And my appointment was initially actually celebrated at Georgia Tech. And so I was very stunned when I got here and it was viewed as controversial. I didn't really expect that or know what to do with it. And by the way, these appointments are not uncommon in academia. Just for example, engineering dean at Berkeley, the engineering dean at Ohio State also have board appointments. And we can go on and on. There's many people that have board appointments. They're academics. The primary role I have on that board is to advise the CEO, which is the role of the board in general, and the executive leadership of the company. So I have served on 3 companies since I've been on the board. I've been on the Ethics and Compliance Committee, I've been on the Human Resources Committee, and on the Technology and Information Security Committee. So to the point of the question, a few weeks ago I spoke directly with CEO of the company, Tom Bell, about the level of Leidos' involvement in the Israel-Hamas war. And in response, Tom sent me a fairly detailed document containing every current Leidos contract in Israel or with Israel. So I reviewed that, and I was very reassured and can say with confidence there are no current activities that involve Leidos in the conflict. None. The vast majority of the current activity involves civil infrastructure type projects. Like, I'm sure that those of you that fly, you've seen the Leidos branded archways that you go through TSA security. So those are the kind of things that exist all over the world, including in Israel. And without being too specific, if you add up the total dollar amount of all the projects, it's just a minuscule fraction of the company business. And there would not even be impactful to anything that's happening in Gaza. So these same type of questions were leveled at me and Leidos when the Trump administration was caging kids at the border, if you remember that. And I did the same thing then as I did now. I asked the company for some assurance that the company was not involved in activities that I personally viewed as unacceptable. And they were not. They were not involved at all. And the point I'm making there is I see my role, part of my role as a board member is to ask these ethical questions and to try to guide the company in the way that I think is the right way. So with respect to my fellow board members that are, I think all upstanding, ethical people, I think that if I were not on that board, I'm not sure who would be asking these questions. So I think it's important to have my voice heard on these issues. So that's kind of the answer.
In related news this week, the Whole Earth Festival, set for this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, is changing its location from the Memorial Quad to Russell Field. It will otherwise go on as planned and feature a variety of craft vendors, live music, sustainable art, and more. The ASUCD Senate also unanimously passed a resolution this past week condemning an attack on the pro-Palestine encampment at UCLA. That's all we have for today, but we will continue to provide live updates and coverage of the encampment as long as it continues. Many thanks to Rivers Stout and Vince Basada for their work reporting on and editing this episode. And thanks for listening. This was Agricola. See you next week.